Here have already gone through the eligibility process with DSPD.
You got the packet 3 times.
You got the packet 3 times? Mm-hmm. Has it changed every single time? Got bigger?
I never started any of it. I get stuck just looking at it.
Yeah. Well, it's a little overwhelming. This is true.
Once, but yeah.
You got the packet once? Okay. Okay. You know, I hate to tell you, but that's not the hardest part, okay? The hardest part is not filling that out, all right? The hardest part is getting the psychological through the schools and all of those other things, all right? But eligibility, let me just tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into all of this. I have a daughter who is 39 with special needs. I was 4 when I had her. And she is absolutely the light of my life. And she started me in this because I thought, you know, 39 years ago, there was nothing out there. And if it was a well-kept secret, okay? Because you figure 94142 just came into place. That's that was the law that for appropriate education for kids with disabilities and all of those things. And so we stumbled through trying to find services for my daughter. Well, I got smart at some point. And I said, you know what, there's all of these things I don't know, so I might as well get paid for learning them. So I got into the field. So I've been in the field for about 37 years. I lived for 15 years in Texas and raised 2 other children there, and worked in the private sector there with all of that. Now, let me just say that you guys are really lucky. You live in Utah with a wait list of only about 2,000 people. They have 80,000 and it's frozen, okay? So services there, and they're still doing ICFs, and it's just an ugly mess. But I learned a lot, okay? And there's a lot that you have to do in translating back and forth. You know, they're still doing annual staffings. We're not. We do PCSPs. So there's, you know, it's almost like a different language over the. How many of you know that if you move your child from here with services, that if you go in and live in any other state, you start all over again? Your services will transfer throughout the state, but if you change to a different state, you start all over again, just as if you've never applied, okay? And that's a real problem for a lot of parents who think, especially coming from California, because it's automatic in California, right? They get services for their kids. They call me and they'll say, so tell me about your services in Utah. Have you been through the eligibility process? Are you a resident of Utah? I can't do anything for you until then, okay? And then you get to go on a wait list. The wait list is determined by needs, okay? So it's not like you go through the wait list, you get on the wait list and all of a sudden you're 2001. You're not. It's based on need. So you could be 4 one day because your need is high, and you're going to be 24 the next day because you've got 20 more people that are higher than you on the needs assessment, okay? So it's a real awkward thing.
So you could be stuck at 2,000 for the rest of their life too, though.
We're fixing that,
Okay.
And now I'm being recorded, so I can't say any more. So, so I said nothing, all right? So, so I didn't change pages. Promise me I could change pages just by pushing that little button. Push play. I do. All right, play.
So sorry, kind of back to that. Is there no time frame then? Like if you're on the wait list, there's not like a guarantee after 5 years you get services?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I have people on my wait list that have been there for, thank you, for 7 years. And I have people that have been on my wait list for 6 months that are taken off. Just all depends, okay? Okay, so these are the eligible diagnoses. Now, believe it or not, I get a lot of people that come through and want to get into DSPD services based on mental health issues, okay? Any kind of mental health issues, you know, depression, anxiety, all of those things are not eligible diagnoses. I'm going to look at all of those, I'm going to write them down, and I'm going to throw them out, right? Because it's not an eligible diagnosis. So an intellectual disability. And when I say intellectual disability, that does not include anybody here in this room from what I've heard. Does that make sense? Okay, Down syndrome is not an intellectual disability. It's a related condition. Okay? So intellectual disability is just going to be mild, moderate, severe mental retardation, right? Okay. And if I'm going to make you eligible under related condition or under intellectual disability, I have to have a psychological that says mild, moderate, severe. And this is, like I said, that's the hardest part to get through if you're going for intellectual disability, all right? Because the psychologists, a lot of times, they don't or they can't make that diagnosis, okay? So what they do is they'll say, is eligible for classification of intellectual disability. And then it's worthless to me, okay? So in reading all of that, that's the biggest hurdle we have to overcome. Now, when we're looking at related conditions, it's a little bit easier, because if we're looking with somebody with Down syndrome, that makes it easy. Because then I get a psychological. It doesn't have to necessarily tell me mild, moderate, severe, but I have to have what's called an ICD-9 code from the doctor that says, have I lost y'all yet? Okay. Yeah. Okay. The ICD-9 code is the code that the doctor uses that says what your disability is. Okay? It's a medical number. Okay? And so the related condition says Down syndrome. Okay? Autism spectrum. Now that's another one that is an eligible diagnosis. Okay? A lot of people being diagnosed with autism spectrum. If I get somebody that comes in with autism spectrum and I get everything into place, the last thing I have to do before I can make an eligibility determination is I have to send it to eligibility committee. Because there's so many people coming through with autism spectrum disorders. Okay? So then they decide. It's totally out of my hands at that point. And traumatic brain injury or acquired brain injury. Those are, and an acquired brain injury is not something that occurs if a child was born without a disability and then at the age of 8 they were in a car accident and they were in a coma and then they came out and they had profound disabilities. They are still considered intellectually disabled. Okay? An acquired brain injury happens after the age of 18. Before that, it will be determined to be an intellectual disability. Okay? And then physical disabilities, CP. It's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head. It's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head.
Paraplegic, would that work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a separate waiver for that if that's the only disability. Okay, so that's the picture. Okay, because this is the hardest part with the psychologicals. I call parents all the time and I'll say, I'm so sorry, you've sent me 7 psychologicals. Has to be within the last 5 years. Okay, psychological has to be within the last 5 years. It has to have a determined diagnosis. It has to be signed by a PhD or a PsyD. It has to have a signature on it, okay? So there's certain elements that I'm looking for as I'm scanning through it all that determine whether I can take that psychological or not. Okay? So here it is. It has to be dated by the professional because I need to know who signed the document. A lot of times I'll get a summary, an evaluation summary, or a summary of the psychological. And it'll have all the dates and everything else. And you know what I do with it? I look at it and I go, wow, that's really interesting. It goes in the file. There's not one thing I can do with that. Same thing with an IEP. I can't do anything with an IEP. I can't use that. And I get a lot of those because people go, well, if they have an IEP, then obviously they're eligible, right? It doesn't determine that for me. And I don't make those rules. I just have to live by them. DHS says I have to, right? So, and then the credentials. It also, and when I say definitive diagnosis, that's what I'm talking about when I say mild, moderate, and severe. Okay? And then the diagnostic tests used. So if they used a WISC, I need to have them list it. I need to have them list the scores. I need to all of those things. And those are the things that I'm looking at and looking for when I'm looking at it. Yes, ma'am?
Are there certain tests then that we should request when we go to the psychologist?
Normally, they do those, but yeah.
And that'll be on the forms or something, what we need?
No.
Okay.
No.
how do we find out what?
They'll know, actually,
they'll
and
know.
they'll know what really the test that they need to use. Because if it's autism, that's why I'm not going to list it, is just because if it's autism spectrum, there's one list. If it's an adult with autism spectrum, it's another list. If it's, you know, if it's a child with an intellectual disability, then there's another list. So, and I wish I could remember them all. I can remember some. Yes, ma'am.
So, in conjunction with their IEP, every 3 years they get reevaluated, and a psychologist is involved in that.
They should get reevaluated every
Well,
3
yes,
years.
they should. But for instance, my son just was last year, and I know a psychologist did an IQ test and whatever. Can I go back to him to get this?
Yes, you have every right to get it. You're the guardian. So you
Okay,
can get a
but
copy of it. Yeah.
He's associated with the preschool. My
Uh-huh.
son's now in kindergarten, and that was his, yeah, the every 3 year evaluation.
Was it early intervention?
Mhm.
Then it was through the school district. Yeah, so you should be able to get it.
Okay.
Okay? And it should have all of those things on it. Now, one of the things I'm telling parents right now, I'm not even, well, okay. One of the things I'm asking parents, because I have a lot of school districts in the area that I'm in. You know, I have Canyons, and I have Granite, and I have Jordan, and I have a few in Salt Lake. So because of that, they like to do it a lot of different ways. A couple of the school districts don't have PhDs or PSYDs. Okay, they don't have people that really can make a definitive diagnosis. So an addendum sometimes will say that that's okay. You know, if somebody will review it that has those credentials and say that they reviewed it and they believe them to have a diagnosis of. Okay.
But
This.
a lot of the school districts don't even have a PhD at all.
Uh-huh.
So then what do?
They don't give you a definitive diagnosis.
Okay, because
You
Alpine
have-
School District.
Yeah.
doesn't have
No, they don't. And I came across that today.
I mean, they do
Uh-huh.
not have anyone.
But if they have a school psychologist that is credentialed to make that that determination, can give a diagnosis, and that's what you're going to have to ask them for, is you're going to have to ask them for somebody who is credentialed to make a definitive diagnosis
So you can't just take that to your regular doctor and have him sign off on it?
for related condition, but
Okay.
not intellectual disability.
Okay.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Oh, well, so now I have a different question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So a related condition, so our children are adults and they have Down syndrome and we've never applied for this. So all we need is a doctor's, we don't need a psychological?
No, you still have to have a
Oh, we
psychological.
still have to have a psychological,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. Okay?
You need a psychological for under 2?
That is a great question. No. But you do need to have
What's the age limit?
7. And if you apply for services under the age of 7, then you have to get a psychological after 7. Okay? So it'll kick that out, and we're working on that right now to have that actually kick a letter out to us that says this person just turned 7 and now we need to. Under the age of 2, however, you do have to have a developmental assessment. And I'll take anything that looks like a developmental assessment,
So OT paperwork.
because that's really what I get. Yeah. Battelle is normally the test that I get for anyone under the age of 7. Okay?
So over 7, no matter what because our son has CP, so
Mhm.
no matter what, we will be required to get a psychological.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So you need a psychological even if it's for related?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And it has to be after the age of 7. Like, so if we have.
Psychological after the age of 7. 5 is a developmental assessment.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, wait. So, with my son that I mentioned, so he's 6, he's not yet 7.
Okay.
He had the whole psychologist evaluation.
Even
at
better.
5.
Even better. However, they can't IQ him. So that's why, is because under the
did
age of
IQ
7,
him.
they did?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Even better. Because maybe they'll wait until he's 5 before they ask for it again. But normally they won't IQ under the age of 7. That's why the cutoff is at 7.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised they did, but they did.
And so am I.
So after her child turns 7, she's going to have it
Do I
again?
have to do it again after 7?
She's already done it.
You've already done it. It has a diagnosis. It has an IQ score. No, you'll have to do it in 5 years. But that's only, don't run out and grab another one. Okay? Just if they ask you for it, there's a member receives notice that they're going to receive services. Okay, then it's taken away from me and it's given to a transition worker. And see, this is where it gets kind of messy and sticky, okay, because nobody gets this, all right? I'm going to tell you that I have, like I said, I've been in this field for 39 years, and I had to work it in order to get it. So this is actually a pit I do for support coordinators, and that's kind of your last step after you get the services, right? So this is probably, I don't know if you want to go this far or not, and maybe we could just kind of skip this, but let me just say that it goes from the intake worker, it goes to a transition worker. All of those people are going to walk you through this process, okay? Because a lot of parents, once you say you're coming off of the wait list, because they go, okay, I'm going to go on the wait list, I'm going to sit here and rot on this wait list. And then they get called and get told that they're coming off of the wait list, and they go, well, now what do? I don't even, I've had a parent say, well, yeah, but he's not ready for a group home. And it's like, he doesn't have to have a group home. It's not the only service that we provide. And that was the only thing they knew, is the group homes, okay? So that transition worker is going to go out and they're going to do what they call a SIS assessment, because it makes me sound smart, right? So they're going to go out and they're going to do the SIS assessment, and then that transition worker is going to send out an ISO, and that ISO is going to mean that you guys are going to interview somebody, and they're going to, or interview a bunch of people, and that's going to be your support coordinator. They choose, okay? Everybody gets to choose who their support coordinator is. Then after their support coordinator, then their support coordinator should be able to walk them through the process. And this is one of the things that I try to tell them, is that because the support coordinators get really frustrated because they're like, you guys aren't giving parents a lot of information. And it's because parents, guys, there is so much to learn in this. Honestly and truly, I'm learning new stuff every single day. And as soon as I think I know it, they change it. So don't feel frustrated. Please ask any and all questions that you need to ask. If you need to keep calling your intake worker, keep calling your intake worker. Because nobody minds. Honestly, we don't do this for the financial reward of it all, okay? I swear to you, there is no financial reward involved. This is because we really want to do this service, right? So call them and ask them the questions. And then keep asking the support coordinator. Ask any questions and all questions. There is not a stupid question, ever, okay? This is your child. You know your child. You know what your child's needs are. And so you need to, and this whole service is to do nothing more than to help your child become as independent as they possibly can. And that is going to look individualized for everyone, okay? So nobody should be able to talk you into anything. Nobody should be able to talk you out of anything. You should be able to say, these are my child's needs. These are the things that I think we need. And then you go from there, okay? All right, and let's see. Okay, so are there any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Could you just go over what the services are that they provide?
Are we talking under 18 or over 18?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Under 18 is probably